All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the 411 Ground and Pound MMA podcast. We are your weekly look into the wide, wacky, wonderful world of mixed martial arts. My name is Robert Winfree, and I am your host per usual. If you don't mind a little bit of the usual stuff here, please interact with the product a little bit. Like, comment, subscribe, star rating, written review, whatever is applicable to your podcast platform of choice, however few there remain in the world these days. Please do so. Feed the algorithm and help keep us, happy and healthy. And I'm not even going to pretend I get paid for this. I do not have nearly a big enough audience to justify that claim. But, keep everything happy and whatnot and working and the various algorithms that might soon control our lives depending on how much time you spend online. And as someone who spends far too much time online, yeah, dude, the algorithmic machinations are kind of real, and you can tell. Anyway, and if you've done any and all of that, sharing around is helpful. Social media platform of choice, individual social circle of choice, whatever happens to work in that respect. So thank you very, very much. I appreciate all of you. All right, on the agenda this evening, last night, UFC and ESPN Plus 87. We will talk about all the fallout from that and just very briefly say about that card. I was moderately optimistic, I think. For a variety of reasons, I left with a slightly more sour impression. Some of it was through no fault of anyone. They had a fight fall through the day of, and that means a lot of vamping. Then you had a weird sort of procession of decisions, finishes, and it just led to a very odd rhythm for the broadcast. And that was felt as a, I felt it at least, and I mean, look, when your first 30 minutes is a lot of vamping and a bunch of it is like Daniel Cormier and Alan Jouban going back and forth about whether or not Jouban jinxed a previous card, because I don't remember the event, but I remember the incident. We had come out of a preliminary portion of the card that was like nothing but finishes. And Jouban was one of the talking heads at the analyst desk, and when the cage side guys run out of stuff to vamp about, hey, let the talking heads talk, and we'll reset stuff down here and whatnot. And, but so they had done that, and Jouban had been very complimentary and basically jinxed the main card, which wound up sucking. So I remember the incident, and we just spent a bunch of time with Cormier and Jouban kind of playfully ribbing each other about that. But they had a rough broadcast, and it's not really their fault this time. Sometimes that's just the nature of the beast, and when you watch enough both fighting or any live, especially live event, you can tell beforehand when you watch enough of it how this like okay, how are we doing for content here? I think of WWE specifically. Um, there's a non-trivial chance that someone who watches a lot of it with a critical eye, and since that's one of the things I do, in the first like 2 minutes of an episode, I can tell you with a shocking degree of reliability what kind of show we're getting in terms of what's the rhythm. Like, are we hurting for content here? Are we filled? And again, there's stuff you can pick up on if you know how to look for it. So we had unfortunately a little bit of that, but the fights we'll get into them. Then we will be previewing UFC on ESPN Plus 88. These two cards are a little bit they're very similar in the sense that they're not spectacular. For fight nights, they're good on paper, not great, above average. If you want to say there's a meaningful distinction between above average and good, that's where they'd fall. They're not average, maybe a shade under good, so whatever you want to call that. On paper only. Again, just on paper. That's where we are. And they're we're kind of leading up to UFC 290. Which one is it? Is it 6? They're back in Abu Dhabi. It's Makhachev and Oliveira 2. It's at 4. 6 is the end of the year. 294. Don't know why I confused that. Maybe it's apropos that UFC on ESPN Plus 87 was just a touch cursed. That was technically speaking UFC event number 666. I hadn't realized that. But yeah, they should have done something with that. They really like that should have been your that could have been your hashtag. That could have been you could have done something with that. It's Halloween. You actually hit event 666 during the month of October and you didn't do anything with that? Again, missed opportunities. That's kind of the name of the game for the UFC these days, I guess. Anyway, point being there, UFC 294 is on the horizon and we're kind of just marking time until then. And they're hoping to kind of close out the year with a bang. We don't have much time between 294 and then 295, and a pretty decent chunk of time between 95 and 96, which, okay, that's understandable given the time of year. You don't when are you going to put your pay-per-view? You don't want to put it too close to the end of uh, necessarily to the end of November because Thanksgiving's right around there. You don't want to go too deep into December because Christmas and the New Year's. So you got to navigate that space a little bit carefully. I understand that. But we're just ticking over the clock. We're just, again, machinery turning over. Hopefully we get good events. Also going to talk a little bit about Bellator 300 and maybe some other loose stuff from the combat sports weekend, I suppose. We'll see. Then a little bit of news. There's some news to talk about, so that's what we've got on the horizon. So, yeah, that's what we got. All right, that's the preamble. I don't think I have anything else to talk about here, so let's jump into it, shall we? I don't want to be here forever, and you already know how long this is going to take me, so I envy you your knowledge. All right, UFC on ESPN plus 87 main event. Look, man, I came out last week. I said I'm I'm not trying to dismiss Bobby Green, but I don't have a compelling reason to pick him. And I was not alone in that sentiment. The odds were pretty heavily. I think Dawson was minus 500, give or take. That's what the UFC had him listed as. And I don't know who does the UFC stats, I don't know who they take their odds from. But Dawson was a significant favorite. I think by no matter who had the book. And I said I didn't want to dismiss Bobby Green. He's not a bad fighter by any stretch of the imagination. In fact, he seems to have found his footing recently in some respects. But I kind of thought this might go similar to Green and Makhachev, or again something in that vein. Green struggled a little bit with really persistent, dominant wrestlers. Well, turns out Bobby Green knew all that and was like, you know what? Nah, I'm not here for that. Knocks out Grant Dawson in 33 seconds. He came out, important note here. This is one of those real small things that maybe you might not think matters. I think it might have. Green comes out right away and immediately, he doesn't clinch, but he starts pushing forward on Dawson, instantly gets him backing up. Dawson, younger fighter, one of those guys, he's got one loss early in his career. Coming into this, he was like 21 and 1, not 21 and 1, but 20 wins, one draw and one loss. Hadn't lost in the UFC, had one draw in the UFC when he fought Ricky Glenn. But some of the ways you can stifle a guy like that when they're really full of, they're on the come up, they're full of themselves, maybe not even in a bad way, but just, full of self-belief. Get them on the back foot right away. See how hard it is to get them on the back foot, and Dawson started retreating pretty quickly, and Green he pushed right into him. It was an interesting way that played out. Not a whole lot. I mean, not a whole lot happened here. We had a little bit of pressure. Then Green was southpaw, and Dawson just got caught. He was kind of stepping from a more squared stance to a bladed stance, and just wasn't as mindful of the angle as he should have been. Green splits his timing, splits his not splits his timing, splits his rhythm. Beautiful left, right to the jaw, drops him, pounds him out on the ground pretty quickly. Um, I look, man. I remember Bobby Green when he was Hood style. And he was Poetry in Motion for a bit, but Bobby Green's been in the UFC for over 10 years. He's 37. He'll be 38. No, he just turned 37. Excuse me. Yeah, just barely turned 37, but still, 37. That's a rough place to be in the lightweight division. But he started fighting in '08. I mean, that's what, 15 years? And his UFC debut, I already mentioned, it's been 10 years, but he debuted for the UFC specifically after Strikeforce dissolved. His UFC debut was against Jacob Volkman in February of 2013, so he's over a decade. And he's had ups and downs, man. But I mean, let me just read you his UFC run real fast. It's fairly lengthy, but I'll try to be quick about this. So I mentioned Volkman submits him. Has that fight with James Krause where he wins via body kick that was sort of it was an argument about whether or not it was a low blow. There had been low blows earlier, which make you more susceptible to the body. It was weird, but stops James Krause. Beats Pat Healy. That was a bit of an upset. Healy was a hard-nosed wrestler at that point, and Green held him off. Josh Thompson, split decision, tough fight. Loses to Edson Barboza. Gets knocked out by Dustin Poirier. Drops a split decision to Rashid Magomedov. That was a tough fight for him. Fights to a split draw with Lando Venata. That was actually a really good fight. Beats Eric Koch. Loses to Drakkar Klose. Loses to Francisco Trinaldo. And, that was in 2019. You might have thought, he's been here for a bit. He had his run. Goes on a pretty decent 3-fight winning streak, actually. Beats Clay Guida, rematches Lando Venata and beats him. Beats Alan Patrick, loses to Thiago Moises, loses to Rafael Fiziev. That was an interesting fight because Fiziev won the first 2 rounds, but might have been... Green started coming on a little bit there down the stretch, if memory serves. That was UFC 265. Yeah, there was one 30-27 for Fiziev that was a little sketchy, but yeah, Green started to put some stuff together. Then he knocks out Ali Aquinta, beats Nasrat Hakparas, fights on short notice against Islam Makhachev, loses. Fights Drew Dober, loses. Has that fight with Jared Gordon go to a no contest that was earlier this year, then puts Tony Ferguson to sleep, and here knocks out Grant Dawson. That's a That's not every top lightweight in the world, but lightweight is a division that if you have longevity, what you are is like in the trenches, man. That your campaign at lightweight, as a general rule, is a series of World War I style trench warfare battles. You are mucking your way across no man's land, trying to get up the hill. Occasionally, you get someone who streaks through. You get a Conor, uh, for whatever value you want to assign that. But if you're in the UFC's lightweight division for a long period of time, you've got battle scars for that, man. You've been up, you've been down, you've had the tough fights, you've had the tough losses, you've had fights you maybe should have won that didn't. You've won fights you maybe shouldn't have on occasion. It's rough. It's just rough. So much as I got that prediction wrong, I'm not gonna feel bad about it. I can't. I have to feel good for Bobby Green, man. Man, a guy I've watched for a long time. I watched not only his Strikeforce days, I remember some of his King of the Cage stuff. Like, this guy's been around, and look, I've been somewhat skeptical and cynical about Grant Dawson being ranked number 10 in the UFC's lightweight division coming into this, and I think skeptical with good reason. He'd never beaten a ranked opponent, to the best of my research and recollection. Now, that being said, was Grant Dawson still, the bright prospect whose ascension had been somewhat unheralded even? Yeah, he was. And yeah, I picked him. But Green turning him back, I feel good for Bobby Green, man. That's a guy who's trying to give his kids the best that he can. He's publicly talked about this. And seeing him kind of start a late career resurgence may not be the right word, but a late rally. I mean, again, 37. I'm not saying he can't do this forever. Nobody can do this forever. I'm not saying he's going to retire in the next 2 years, but I wouldn't be shocked if he did. There's a toll that this takes on you. But Seeing him really kind of get this rally going he's got, it's heartwarming. It's heartening. After the fight, he said he would like to. He didn't call out anyone specifically. What kind of got floated was, and then stuff that's been floating around a bit was him and Dan Hooker. Yes, please. It would. Dawson being ranked 10 was highly speculative. I don't think Bobby Green will take number 10. The UFC's rankings are weird, but that would be a bit much. A fight with Dan Hooker would be because Dan Hooker at the moment, whether he changes this status quo later or not, remains to be seen. At the moment, Dan Hooker and I have enjoyed a lot of Dan Hooker fights. He's a top 10-ish gatekeeper, somewhere in that space. Again, maybe not 10, you know, generally between like 8 and 12 is where he's floating, and he's a good at the moment he's a gatekeeper for that space. So seeing him and Green fight would be a real serious acid test for whether if Green's actually found his rhythm, found his footing, and is going to make some kind of a push, Dan Hooker's going to test that, and I think the fight would be great. So I am completely down with that fight. The fact that they've both like in addition to saying yes I'd like to fight, we're doing like yeah screw Renato Moicano. um, Amused me for reasons I don't know the genesis of that beef, but it amused me. So lightweight's in a weird spot, man. You know, you've got the champion Islam Makhachev is going to rematch Charles Oliveira. Islam's talking about wanting to fight for the welterweight belt. And Justin Gaethje does complicate this just a bit, but mostly because we haven't seen him in Makhachev. But there's a real argument you could make right now that the actual number one contender at lightweight is Alexander Volkanovski. Given that you could argue he won that first fight with Makhachev. I don't know how. I scored it for him in real time. I don't object to it going to Makhachev, so I've been over that. But other than that, you're in this weird spot, man. You got how was it? I saw this on somebody did this on Twitter and it amused me, but there's some truth to this. So hang on, let me find this exactly because it should also have yeah, here it is. So Oliveira, former champ, next fighting for the belt. Justin Gaethje probably next in line after Oliveira, depending on what we do with Makhachev and Dustin Poirier sitting at number 3. He won't fight down in the rankings. As a general rule, he's looking for bigger money fights. Number 4, Beneil Dariush. Dude, that guy. I don't have this as its own like news bit later, but kind of came out during this last week. He signed to fight Arman Tsarukyan, who I'll talk about in a minute or two. Dude, Dariush will fight anybody. Just anybody. And bless him for it. Then you got Michael Chandler, who's waiting on Conor. More on that later. You got Mateusz Gamrot, who has some good wins, and he's got some weird wins. You got Rafael Fiziev, who it was confirmed he tore his ACL, is going to be out for a year, in all probability. So he's out of the picture. You got Tsarukyan, good prospect, but his developmental issues are starting to rear their head, and there's some seasoning that needs to happen. Hooker at number 9 at the moment, gatekeeper. You had Dawson at 10. Now you have something like Bobby Green. Rafael dos Anjos is 11 for no discernible reason. Jalen Turner, who just had the loss to Hooker, so another guy who Jalen Turner's another guy who you're prospecting with him, you're speculating, not unfairly. You've got Moicano at 13, who's in a weird spot, and he got destroyed by Rafael by RDA when they fought. Matt Frivola, who's good for an action fight, but we don't know if he's good for more than that. And then you got Diego Ferreira, and I'm not sure what he's up to these days. That's the top 15, and then you have Makhachev as champion, obviously. It's a weird spot, man. Like, look, lightweight is a great division. It turns in pretty good fights. It's one of the best divisions in the sport. We can also acknowledge that the division's health at the moment is a little bit, like there's some turnover that needs to happen, and we're just not there yet. So, but yeah, that was your main event. So I don't know what I'm down for. Green and Hooker. Both those guys seem down for it. Sweet, good fight. Easily could main event a fight night with that one. Bring it on. Sucks for Dawson, but you usually get this with prospects like him, especially if they're like good early, have a setback, go on a big run. They eventually wind up hitting some kind of a roadblock. In his case, it was a crafty veteran who got in his head right away and then got his timing very, very quickly. I my hunch is he'll rebound. Like it's never good to lose, but unless this exposes him as being super chinny, and given some of the other fights he's had and some of the other punches he's taken, I don't think he is. I imagine he'll bounce back and be okay. He's still young. He's still got a lot of ability, but a loss like this does not necessitate or does not immediately indicate the end of the world. So I expect him to bounce back. So co-main event, middleweight Joe Pyfer chokes out Abdul Razak Al Hassan via arm triangle 205 of the second. Some interesting stuff here. Al Hassan, very upright in his posture, got taken down pretty easily more than once. Um, what I think, what you can take away from this, a couple of things. Pfeiffer's willingness to do that, I appreciate. His offensive punching is very head oriented. Al-Hassan was able to block and catch and just kind of absorb a bunch of it and then counter back. Might be troublesome. Someone with a defensive first mindset to absorbing that pressure and then countering will give him problems. Pfeiffer susceptible to calf kicks. They were not. He was not happy with those. It led to the finish when he hit his double. When he had a double leg into half guard. Alessandro kind of wrapped the head. So Pfeiffer's like half working on a Von Flue choke. Alessandro realizes that, let's go, but is now trapped in one of the dangers of wrapping the head when you go down. You can get arm triangled. So Pfeiffer, again, keeps the position, uses hip smash pass into mount, move to side control, lock the choke down. Alhassan taps, but he taps with his fist, and the referee, like, hey, are you tapping? And then he's unconscious, so he checks the arm, like, okay, no, we're done. Like, if you're going to tap, you do kind of have to make that a very visible thing. Tapping with a fist, you could just be punching them, which is not effective, but it's also not tapping, so. But, yeah, calf kicks might be a problem for Pfeiffer. He slowed a bit. Like, he had a good explosion to get the takedown at the end, but his, like, fervor for the fight had kind of faded just a bit, and getting hit hard in the calf sucks. That'll do that to you. So, a few things to note for Pfeiffer going forward about that. Not a whole lot to say about Al Hassan. He's still kind of who he has been for a while. Welterweights. Joaquin Buckley defeats Alex Morono via unanimous decision. Two 30-27s and a 30-26. 30-26 totally justified. I'm surprised there weren't more 10-8s for that third. I didn't in real time. I did get, this is one of those, there's a couple of things I rewatched here before this show because I got them wrong in real time and I wanted to see like why, what happened, do I agree with my past self? Should have been 10-8 here from me. Past self did not do that right. Buckley just powerful, fast, fast hands, decent movement. Morono's constantly moving, and it's given guys problems. Morono had moments of success here. I don't mean to undersell that. The third round should have been 10-8. Yes, that was a bad round for Morono. But the other two, like, he lost them, and he lost them fairly, but they were competitive. Buckley at 170 seems to be something. I mean, he was up and down at middleweight, but here at welterweight, he's got his height is more suited for this division. If he's got his diet under control, the man is built. Um, I mean, he was visibly muscular at 185. Cutting down, like, dude is shredded. Um, if he's able to keep that under control, he's got a good frame for the division. He's thick. Again, clearly powerful, fast hands. Curious to see what he does going forward. He's looked good in his two welterweight fights. Because when he beat up Andre Fialho, and beating up Morono is no easy thing. Um, yeah, I'm very curious to see what he does. At lightweight, Drew Dober stopped Ricky Glenn, 236 of the first with punches. About what everyone expected here, I think. Both men southpaw. Dober just able to start finding his left hand around the lead guard, the lead hand of Glenn. Cracked him a few times, dropped him, got the finish. Good stuff from Dober. And kicking off the main card, Bill Algeo defeated Alexander Hernandez via unanimous decision, 30-27 across the board. Um, interesting stuff here. Hernandez still has some ability. He looked better here at featherweight than he did when he fought Billy Quarantillo. Part of that is because Billy Quarantillo is an animal. That dude has an absurd pace and ability to absorb and kind of just deal with damage. Because if you'll recall their fight, Billy lost that first round. Then the second, just his pace, man, he just melted Hernandez. Algeo didn't quite do that. A bit more surgical, but Hernandez struggled to really assert himself. He landed some pretty good body shots. I actually appreciate that he was doing that very intelligently. He struggled to reach the head, go to the body. It's a lingering target. Some leg kicks would have helped in that respect. Early on, he kept, because Algeo does a fair bit of switching. He seems to like operating southpaw. Hernandez really wanted, I think, open stance. I'm not sure why, but he did. So he landed some body shots, but he was getting countered. The length difference was a problem that he struggled to navigate consistently. He found moments of success, but really good win from Bill Algeo here, in all honesty. Pretty good leg kicks, good long rangey punches. I'd rather his hands were a bit more up at times, and I'd rather. There's certain punches he throws that he's just very, very used to this being the last blow of either a combination or he's throwing it to move. Following it up would have been nice. Something to work on in the future, I suppose. But Hernandez is in a kind of a rough spot, whereas Algeo after the fight said, like, he called out a bunch of people, some of which were silly. Because Cormier says, you gotta have a name. Who do you want to see next? And he said, like, my callouts never work. So how about the following? And he produced the list. I have Billy Quarantillo, um, Fauci. Not that I don't have a lot of good things to say about Fauci, but asking to fist fight a whatever 70-year-old man seems a little bit much. Um, the other ones, hang on. I wish to look this up now because I had it written down. Yeah, Billy Quarantillo, Cron Gracie. Yeah, he mentioned Fauci, Nate Landwehr, or Mark Zuckerberg. Again, if the gag is my callouts never work, so I'm going to shotgun feces at the wall and see what sticks, I appreciate the gag. Quarantillo seemed interested in a fight between the two of them in December. Obviously, we have to see how that plays out, but good win for Algeo. Good win for Algeo in that respect. That was the main card. Prelims. Karolina Kowalkiewicz defeated Diana Belbica via unanimous decision, 30-27 across the boards. Live, I gave Belbica the first. I'll kind of stand by that. But this was a very women's MMA fight in the following way. If you watch a lot of women's striking, not all of it, but a lot of it, especially mid to low tier, they circle, they both come in, they have their combination, like they're hitting pads, and then they back off, circle, repeat. I think at times I've likened it to that bit from a Simpsons episode where all the Simpson men are in a circle and two guys have pots on their heads and they circle each other and then run into it and then run into each other like billy goats. Um, this was kind of that. The difference was after the first round, Carolina's corner told her, "Hey, throw the right uppercut." She keeps coming in. She's got the like high Muay Thai shoulders and high guard position. She ducks when she comes in. Change your right straight to an uppercut. You'll land and you'll do damage, and then that's all she did. She substituted that punch for her other punch, and it worked. That's what it was. Flyweight Nate Maness defeated Mateus Mendonça via TKO, punches and hammer fist on the ground. 440 of the first. Maness pushed forward right away. Mendonça either didn't like the power or really wanted to tie up. He wound up going for the leg repeatedly, kept trying for leg locks, and Maness was hip to it, defended, and hit him repeatedly until eventually hurt him badly enough to force the stoppage. Solid win from Maness. He called out CJ Vergara after the fight. Very reasonable call out. Women's strawweight. This is another one I had a very different scorecard in real time. I want to talk about it briefly. Vanessa Demopoulos defeated Kanako Murata via unanimous decision, 29-28 across the boards. So here's the thing. Live, I was 30-27 for Murata. Freely going to admit I got round one wrong. Don't quite know what I was doing there. Got it wrong. I shouldn't say I don't know what I was doing. I can see why I got it wrong. Still got it wrong. 1,000,000% not correct. My bad. Doing this live is fraught with peril and is not always accurate. I'm more than willing to admit when that happens. Happened here. Got the first round wrong. Round 3, everyone gave to Murata. Round 2 is the one that I would dispute just a bit. Well, dispute's the wrong word. That's the one I think needs a more fine-toothed examination. So, actually, let me double check the official scorecards here, because I am curious about this one. Yeah, all 3 judges gave Murata the third. So the second is the one that I would kind of like to take a brief look at here. So the argument here is that Murata had takedowns and some control, which she did, but that doesn't win you the fight if your opponent is doing more damage, being more active. And Demopoulos was the more active fighter, even off of her back in the second round. That's the argument. Having rewatched that round, I have arrived at the conclusion that I don't care. I think 29-28 either way for that round is fine. If you do lean more heavily towards damage, and in theory that's what the criteria calls for, but we all know how universally that's applied, Demopoulos could win. I'm not bent out of shape about that one. Again, doing it live, I kind of went, I thought Murata should have had it. Rewatching the second in particular, Murata's wrestling is very good. She stifles almost every position or move in that respect that Demopoulos makes, but she doesn't have a lot of offense behind her control, and that is kind of a problem. The size disparity between these two kind of shocked me when they were next to each other. Demopoulos looked a weight class bigger. I wonder if Murata wouldn't be better served at atomweight, which I know the UFC doesn't have. But and I haven't. It was just surprising to see Demopoulos as the demonstrably larger woman. So, again, real time, I was more for Murata. Rewatch/rethink. 29-28 either way is fine, and the fact that all 3 judges went 29-28 for Demopoulos doesn't bother me one iota. So, yeah, sucks for Murata coming back after a pretty decent layoff, but she's got to get her ground and pound going more decisively. She had opportunities for it, and especially in that second round, that she should have taken. That would have made that a much. She could have won this fight. Put it like that. There's a couple of very minor decisions that she could have changed and won this fight. Next up at bantamweight, Orichi Long defeated Johnny Munoz via unanimous decision, 29-28 across the board. First round, Munoz doesn't love the power of Orichi Long. Gets a takedown, gets the back, rides out most of the round there. Second and third, he can't get takedowns. Orichi Long is able to keep up, keep a distance, batter him with punches and kicks. Goes into his guard a handful of times and does some work from there. there might have been an opportunity at various points for Richie Long to maybe hunt for a finish, but some of that is outside observation going, maybe, and I'm not in there. I don't know how the other guy feels. Occasionally it's obvious when someone's like kind of ready to go, and if you can't get them out of there when they're ready to go, that says something about you, but I'm not going to hold this one against Orichi Long here. Pretty solid win for him. Him at bantamweight, because he struggled early at flyweight in his career. At bantamweight, he's 3-1. He's only lost in that weight class, in the UFC at least, to Ayman Zahabi. So curious to see what he's able to make of himself. And kicking everything off, JJ Aldrich defeated Montana De La Rosa via unanimous decision, 30-27 across the boards. I think I gave De La Rosa the first, which I might actually stand by, but Aldrich 2-3, not too much. I had a brief moment of hope in this fight. You see, after it was over, there was some brief discussion about, well, it was mostly a striking affair, and we're not quite sure how some of these rounds were scored. And Daniel Cormier said, if Aldrich doesn't win, I'm leaving. And I suddenly had a rooting interest in this fight. I, I do not like Daniel Cormier's commentary. But De La Rosa, she tried like one takedown all fight. You were never going to beat JJ Aldrich in a pure kickboxing affair. Which is just what we got, and there we are. You may have noted I did not mention a fight of the night. None was awarded. Little bit unfortunate. I thought Algio and Hernandez. You maybe could have gone there. Our performances of the night went to Bobby Green, Joe Pfeiffer, Drew Dober, and Nate Maness. So one of those, get a finish, get a bonus nights. Yeah, Maness, Dober, Pfeiffer, yeah. Which the UFC could do every time, but they don't. Because reasons. Yeah, that was the event. My full report is in the MMA Zone of 411mania.com. Again, keep in mind that having rewatched a couple of those fights, I do not agree with my live scoring. But if you want to read that, it's over there. I'd appreciate it. All right, let's move on. We'll do the combat sports. We'll do the weekend stuff, the other MMA events after we preview this upcoming card. So let's do that first. So UFC on ESPN Plus 88 will be coming our way Saturday, October 14th from the Apex once again. Last thing on the previous fight, and we'll get to this. We had been scheduled to get Felipe Lins versus Iwan Kutelaba. That fell out. Lins had some kind of an illness. Commentary kind of buried him a little bit, saying that, this might be a mental thing and he's just manifesting an illness. And I get the promotional frustration with Lins. That's the second time I think he's had an issue on like fight day. But I'm not a big fan of how that was handled. Just if I can be honest. So we're not sure they're going to try and rebook that. I don't know if it's going to be moved to this coming card. That's kind of why I brought that up. That had been hinted. It might move later. It might fall apart entirely. Who knows? So let's get into this card. Main event, featherweight, Super Sodiq Yusuff and Edson Barboza. Curious about this one. Yusuff he's been out for about a year. He beat Don Shainis last time out. He's on a his UFC run, he's got one loss? Yeah, so his UFC resume goes as such. He debuts, beats Suman Mokhtarian, beats Shayman Moraes, beats Gabriel Benitez, beats Andre Fili, loses to Arnold Allen, tough draw, beats Alex Caceres, and beats Don Shainis. Then, not sure why he's been out for a year. He's getting a step up in class. Edson Barboza, another guy who's been around forever. I've watched his entire UFC career. He's been here for 13 years, almost, November of 2010. I watched his live debut. Did I cover 123? I don't know. I might have. I was watching. I remember because he stops Mike Lulo with leg kicks. One of the first times that it happened in the UFC. Might have been the first. Beats Anthony Njokuani. Has that good fight with Ross Pearson. Knocks out Terry Edom with a wheel kick. Significant upset when he lost to Jamie Varner. Wins 3 more, loses to Donald Cerrone, wins a couple, loses, and that's kind of been back in. Dude, his fight with Tony Ferguson was nuts. If you haven't seen that one, from 2015, it was one of my fights of the year. Uh, Great fight. Beats Anthony Pettis, beats Gilbert Melendez, beats Beneil Dariush, loses to Khabib, and that kind of changed his fortunes, man. Because he fought Khabib, who changed his face, and then he fought Kevin Lee, who kind of did the same thing. He stopped Dan Hooker after that, but it was downhill. Then he fought Justin Gaethje and got knocked out. Lost a split to Paul Felder. That was a close fight. Then he moves to featherweight. Loses split decision to Dan Ige that most people kind of thought he should have won. Beats Makwan Amirkhani, knocks out Shane Burgos, loses to Giga Chikadze, loses to Bryce Mitchell. Beat Billy Quarantillo his last time out, though. This is kind of a tough one. The layoff's a bit of a problem for Yusuff, but Barboza's just another guy who's been in the trenches, man, just forever. Lightweight, then featherweight. No easy fights for that guy. I shouldn't say no easy. Like his first couple, Mike Lulo washed out pretty fast, but he was Barboza was only like 7-0 at the time. That was his seventh fight, actually. So he was 6-0 coming into the UFC. I mean, Anthony Njokuani was not an easy touch. He was coming in off the WEC merger. That was a tough fight. Then Ross Pearson was not an easy out. He's If we excluding Mike Lulo, hang on, what would be his quote unquote easiest fight? I have no idea. Maybe Rafael Oliveira? Because he fought Danny Castillo after that, beat him, then fought Cerrone, then Evan Dunham, Bobby Green, Johnson, Felder, Ferguson, Pettis. I already talked about this. Okay. Probably then Makwan Amirkhani. If it's not Mike Lulo, it might be Amirkhani, stylistically, but that just seems to be catching up to Barboza here. But the layoff from Yusuff be a problem. 5 rounds though. Has either guy been 5 rounds? Barboza's been scheduled for 5 before. His fight with tired. Sorry, my brain just short-circuited. His fight with Kevin Lee was for the interim title, and when it was scheduled for 5, I think it stopped in the fifth. It was about halfway through the fifth when the doctor stopped it. I think that's his only 5-rounder. Okay, now he was scheduled for with Chikadze to go 5. That ended in the third. Yeah, he struggled with pressure. That's been kind of a problem for him for a while. He's got good kicks, good punches, physically very strong. So's Yusuff, and he's got hammers, man. If he's smart, he'll pressure. If this were 3 rounds, I might lean towards Barboza. With 5, I'm gonna lean towards Yusuff though. So next up, women's flyweight Jennifer Maia and Viviane Araújo. Maia is on a 2-fight winning streak. Bit of an upset when she beat Casey O'Neill. Araújo, tough run lately. 1-3 in her last 4. Lost to Caitlin Chukagi and Alexa Grasso and Amanda Hebos. There's a degree to which that level of opposition, you give her some credit. And Chukagian, perennial gatekeeper. Grasso, current champion. Hebos has been up and down. That's not a good loss. I think, given how they match up, I might actually lean towards Araujo here. But she might be in do or die as it pertains to top of the division stuff. Maia's a tough out. Yeah, I'm gonna head. this is speculative. I'm gonna lean towards Araujo, but out of idle curiosity, I imagine Maya's the favorite, actually. Have a quick look at that, for the sake of my own curiosity. Yeah, they've got Maya a slight favorite. I'm still gonna lean towards Araujo, but that tracks. Bantamweight, good fight here. Really good fight here. Jonathan Martinez and Adrian Yanez. Martinez doesn't have a lot of. Anytime they try to put the camera in his face and put the mic in front of him, he's not a big talker. He's not clearly a little bit skittish in that respect, but dude has found himself lately. He had a tough debut, losing a fight he probably should have won. Won a couple, lost a tough split decision. Won a couple, got into a firefight with Davey Grant, and got stopped. Um, but since then, 5-0. Stopped Cub Swanson with leg kicks. Got an upset when he beat Said Nurmagomedov. I thought Nurmagomedov was going to win that. Nope. Martinez made that work. Really like Martinez, and I like Yanez. He's got a lot of abilities coming off of that loss to Rob Font, though. How he rebounds from that's going to be important. How old are these two? Yanez is 29. Martinez also 29. I'm Man, that's tough. Again, this is a great fight. Martinez is a bit more of a complete MMA fighter. Yanez invites a little bit too much damage, but he's got really good boxing. He's really good counters when he gets them going. Uh, really good fight. I'm gonna lean towards Martinez. I hate picking against Yanez. I don't. Him losing two in a row. Yeah, this is a this is a tough rebound fight from that Font loss. Like, oh, you had your first UFC loss. You got stopped by Rob Font. Yeah, that was tough. Here, go fight Jonathan Martinez. Yeah. That is some rough matchmaking, man. Um, Currently, I'm looking at what am I looking at? Like best fight odds? Yeah, they've actually got um this is dead even. And a few different outlets have one has Yanez favored, one has Martinez favored. So, it, good matchmaking in the sense that this is a great fight. I'm gonna lean towards Martinez. He's getting a little bit of an acid test here. Again, he's on a pretty good run, and beating Said Nurmagomedov that was big for him. That was real big because Said, he's a he's the real deal, man. He's a tough fighter. He's a very good fighter. Um, but the loser of this is gonna have to do some non-trivial rebuilding, and honestly, just looking at their games, I think Yanez is the guy who needs a bit more help with his game. Um, and I hate to say that because I love his game. I like both of these guys as fighters. I like to watch them fight, but I'm gonna lean towards Martinez just a bit here. Really good fight though. Flyweight Edgar Chairez and Daniel Lacerda. Feels like these two fought very, very recently. Not against each other, but yeah, Chairez fought at UFC Noche, if memory serves. And Lacerda, when did he last fight? Again, I feel like it was recent. Chairez. Oh, these two fought to the no contest. Right. Yeah, they did fight each other recently. You had the bad stoppage call. Okay. So we're just rematching that one. That's fine enough. But what did we learn from that first fight? I think I'm going to lean towards Chavez just a bit. Um, the odds have him as a pretty decent favorite. I think the fight, dude, if you can get like plus 200 money on Lacerda here, that might be you don't mind losing. That might be a decent value bet. I don't mind Chavez being favored, but that margin seems like you're asking for trouble. Just putting that out there. Then at bantamweight, Cameron Simon and Christian Rodriguez. A couple of you guys who have looked pretty decent lately. Rodriguez 2-1 in the UFC. Yeah, the UFC's mad at him because he beat Raul Rosas Jr. Lost to Jonathan Pierce, then the two wins, and again the most recent one over Rosas. They gave him a fighter who's a little bit wild on occasion, and is also pretty good. Simon is 9-0, but 2-0 and 3-0 in the UFC. His first two fights were there was some controversy about again. I think he was just a little bit too keyed up, a little bit too reckless, and he landed some illegal blows that could have cost him. The last one though, when he beat Terrence Mitchell, was actually again was clean. So maybe he's finally settled down in that respect. But he's a young guy. He's got less than 10 total fights. I'm not going to kill him for it. I don't like it, but I'm not going to kill him for it either. Gonna lean towards Simon here. Um, Again, this feels a little punitive by the UFC because Rodriguez bunkied with their favorite hype machine at the moment. So yeah, I'm gonna lean towards Simon. Ooh, a lot of places have Rodriguez as the favorite. Interesting. Not gonna change how I pick. Like if I'm gonna lean toward, it's a close fight. I don't mean to say that, but again read the tea leaves a little bit there. Going with Simon. That's your main card at the moment. I imagine there's an announced middleweight fight between Michel Pereira, Pereira, and Andre Petroski. I imagine that'll be main card. So for the sake of argument, let me just put it here. Feels a little like another kind of gimme for Petroski. The UFC like him. He had that tough fight with Gerald Meerschaert, man. He could have lost that. I seem to recall scoring that for Meerschaert. Um, and Pereira is a wild man. Pereira's on a good run, actually. But 4 or 5 in a row? Ponzinibbio win was pretty big. I actually might favor Pereira there. Like they like Petroski a bit more, but his Pereira's current form kind of feels like it's gonna give him some problems, especially after he had problems with Meerschaert. So, all right, prelims: Darren Elkins and T.J. Brown. Brown's been out for a bit, hasn't he? No, he fought. Am I confusing him with someone else? I think I am. I know I am. Okay. He's not had a great run in the UFC. 3-4. Lost to Bill Algeo last time out. Lost to Jordan Griffin, Danny Chavez, Shaileman Nurdanbeke, and the aforementioned Bill Algeo. Look, I don't like picking Darren Elkins. I really don't. But unless the wheels have completely fallen off, this is the kind of fight he wins. Maybe they have, but I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt at the moment for that one. So. Another time Brown's the look. I'm not going to be shocked if Brown wins. Darren Elkins perpetually looks like 4 miles of bad road before he gets hit. But I don't know. I'm just not completely sold on Brown being able to deal with that pace. Might be wrong. And again, if Elkins loses here, that is the last time I'm ever going to pick him. Lightweight, Terrence McKinney and Chris Duncan. Double check Duncan here real fast. this fight, did we? Get moved around? Apparently this had issues with, apparently this is off. Duncan had visa issues. Okay. Assuming it goes through and I'm not... Oh, Duncan seems to be out, but we have someone else for Terrence McKinney in the form of Brendan Marat. I might have picked McKinney over Duncan. I don't have a problem picking him over a late notice replacement fighter. I'll go with McKinney there. Women's bantamweight, Irina Alekskiva and Melissa Dixon. Let me have a look here. Alekskiva she won her UFC debut, didn't she? She the Russian Ronda? Yeah, yeah. So she's 1-0 in the UFC. She beat Stephanie Egger. She missed weight for that, though. That's never good. Dixon is 5-0. Her UFC debut tonight for this card. That's actually relatively tough. Dixon not coming in via the Contender Series, which would give me a different feel for how they're for how they might be setting this up. Two women, they've got 11 fights between them. I may lean towards Alex Skiva, but I would not bet money on that fight. Bantamweights, pretty good fight here actually. Chris Gutierrez and Alatong Hele. So Gutierrez lost to Pedro Munoz his last time out. That was a tough fight. He knocked out Frankie Edgar in Edgar's retirement fight before that. Dude, that loss to Munoz ended a really good run he was on. It was his second loss in the UFC. So he debuts, loses to Hani Barcelos. Tough fight. Beats Ryan McDonald, beats Geraldo de Freitas, beats Vince Morales, fights to a draw with Cody Durden, beats Andre Ewell, beats Felipe Colares, beats Danal Batgary, knocks out Frankie Edgar, then runs into Munoz, who's ended up kind of being a bad matchup for him. Whereas Alatong Hele won his last two. I got one loss in the UFC. That was to Kevin Casey. This is a step up for Alatong. Um, he will beat Danal Batgary, Ryan Benoit. Again, the last two were Kevin Kroom and then Chad and Helliger. This is a step up for him. Gutierrez definitely represents a step up. I'm okay leaning with Gutierrez for this one. I just, I don't. There's still a fair amount of like upside to Alatong, but you're stepping to a guy who's proven a lot more than you have at this level. So, gonna go with Gutierrez. And we've got Ashley Yoder versus Emily Ducati. Yoder is not having a good time. It's not had a good time of it in the UFC. Lost her first three, won two, lost two, won one, lost two. It's kind of a gimme for Ducati. Ducati's 1-2 in the UFC. I wouldn't call it a gimme. This might be loser leaves town in that particular respect. Yeah, I can't pick Yoder. There's nothing I can pick. And in theory, somewhere on this card, we will have Tainara Lisboa and Havana Oliveira? Brazilian? Yeah, Brazilian, so Havana. So Havana Oliveira. Lisboa had a pretty decent debut, didn't she? Yeah, she kind of beat the crap out of Jessica Rose Clark. Oliveira, I believe this is her UFC debut. She is 7-1-1 overall. 7-fight winning streak, though. I'm still going to go with Lisboa, but yeah, going with Lisboa there, but that's not the worst matchmaking you could think of. Yeah, and that's the card. So, Saturday, I will be covering it in the MMA Zone of 411mania.com. Stop by, say hello. I always appreciate it. All right. Oh, we're moving at a pretty good clip here. All right. So let's talk very briefly about Bellator. So Bellator 300 took place over the. Dude, Saturday was busy, man. You had two different professional wrestling events going on between AEW's Collision, which was apparently kind of meh, and WWE Fastlane, which I don't know how to feel about that one because I've seen very different reactions to it. And somewhat naturally, if you like look at comments and whatnot, the favorable ones like, yes, finally someone who actually saw the event. And all the negative ones are full of people going, yeah, you're right, this was meh. So I don't know. I didn't watch it because I wasn't paid to. um, but yeah, those going at the same time. Then you had again Bellator 300, the UFC event. So for 300, I've checked some of this out. We lost a fight for this. We were supposed to get, isn't it technically a rematch between Ryan Bader and Linton Vassell? I don't know. I don't care that much. Um, so your main card was just three title fights. Um, Main event, the only one I'm actually interested in. So Usman Nurmagomedov beats Brent Primus via wide decision, 50-45 across the board. Um, Usman Nurmagomedov is a top tier lightweight. Uh, he's real. He's really good. He's really good. This was, I think this one of the semifinals for this tournament. So he's gonna go on and fight somebody. Uh, un- See who he will be fighting. He'll be fighting the winner of an upcoming fight between Alexander Shabli and Patricky Pitbull. No reason not to favor Nurmagomedov the whole way. Again, he's really good. As for the rest of that, a couple of these things are worth touching on briefly. Chris Cyborg squashed Katzengano, TKO 4-1 of the first. Liz Carmouche defeated Elimele McFarlane. McFarlane missed weight. This is the second time in a row Carmouche had an opponent miss weight. And then the ruling was your opponent can't win the belt, but if you lose, we're vacating it. Um, she stopped Carmouche stopped McFarlane with leg kick. She had a nasty calf kick in the fifth round. Kind of a whatever fight. Was there on the Leah McCourt got a surprising win over Sarah McMahon. It shouldn't have been that surprising. McMahon's 43. Kai Kamaka and Henry Corrales had an okay fight. This was on here that I mentioned briefly. Um, and if you care about light heavyweights, and I don't blame you if you don't, but Dovlets Don Yagshimurdadov got a win, and I don't hate that guy. Been up and down in Bellator a little bit, but yeah. Again, his Bellator run at the moment, he lost to Corey Anderson, lost to Carl Albrechtson. That was a bit of an upset. Then he beat Rafael Carvalho, Julius Anglikas, and here he beat, I would butcher this gentleman's name. The fact that I get through Dovlets Danyag Shimordadov with a degree of not sounding like a complete tool, hopefully. He beat, what, Mas Mace, Masije, Wozonski? Where is that guy from? Hang on, now I must know. I assume Poland, but I wish to be sure because there's a few different places that he could be from. Yeah, Poland. So I have no faith in my pronunciation of his last name in particular. Okay. Anyway, yeah. Here's the thing about Bellator. This felt a little bit like this isn't the last Bellator event. They've announced a couple of others, but Rumor has it again, Viacom's looking to unload them. PFL might be buying them. There's talk that PFL will continue to have Bellator be a separate entity. Unless you're doing this to rent out broadcast contracts, that's a mistake. There's no value in Bellator as a brand. Bring their roster in, which is quite good. Bring in their library of fights and consolidate into a genuine number two promotion in the United States, maybe in the world. If you put Bellator and PFL's rosters together, yeah, you would have the number two worldwide promotion behind the UFC. I feel pretty confident saying that. So, yeah, again, there were other fights there, but yeah, as a in the spirit of the like proper send off, so to speak, for Bellator, I've dogged them on occasion because they kind of deserve it, but they've been around for a long time, and that's nothing to sneeze at in the MMA landscape. And at times they've been a decent enough alternative to the UFC, so my jokes at their expense aside, they've got some good fighters, and they put on some pretty good fights on occasion if you know how to be discerning about that. So, yeah, I think that's all I have there. Other stuff from the Combat Sports Weekend, very briefly. I think the only thing worth mentioning, so there was a boxing event, and Mark Radulich, my good friend, hit me up and said, "Hey, the ring walks are supposed to be around 11 p.m. Eastern. That's 9 my time. Can you make that with the UFC coverage and whatnot?" And I said, "Yeah, the UFC event should be done by 8 if you assume 6 hours," and I was for the sake of blocking out time. And then I think I had something else to do, and like, yeah, I can be back by 9. So that's what I got. The UFC event wrapped up a little after 7, so I was happy. But I get back to like messages and stuff. I think a little after 8, like 8:20, to a message that's older from Mark going, "Hey, turns out the undercard kind of speed ran everything, and I think they're about ready to make their main event walks." And so I, desperately got on the call, and we're like, after we had just closed out like the fourth or fifth round of this fight between Gabriel Ramirez, better known as Zurdo, and Joe Smith Jr. And I said to tell Mark, like, "I'm sorry. Here's the thing about this. In boxing, most of the time the ring walks are later than acknowledged, and they are because like the high level pros don't care about your broadcast. Like, no, ring walk is between. This is the window. I'm not going earlier than that." I guess these two guys didn't have enough of a profile to go, "Hey, we don't want to go yet. We're still kind of warming up. We shouldn't be walking for another hour." But so Mark and I kind of called the last bit of that and got to call some BS on boxing scoring again. I didn't object to Zurdo winning, but the official scores were it's a 10-round fight. All of them being 99 to 91, little bit no. Smith had I think Mark and I kind of tabulated out. I mean, we had Smith taking at least 3. I think we each get again Ramirez winning, cool. I don't object. I thought he won. These particulars of the scorecards, did not agree with. Not much. But anyway, there we are. Let's see. Okay, as for news, yeah, I gotta talk about this. So, Conor McGregor intimated that he had put his stuff in the USADA pool via some post on a social media platform. Dana White confirmed last night at the post-fight press conference that yes, Conor's paperwork has been in. It still doesn't matter. I don't care. Here's kind of my thought process behind this. So Conor already basically cheated the system, which I'm not even mad at him for. Okay? Dude suffered a pretty horrific injury, and if you go outside, USADA's theoretical purview should end there. Suffered catastrophic injury, USADA gets to go away. My opinion. But because USADA is run by zealots and not thinking rational human beings, So Conor just basically effed off and did whatever he wanted to while recovering from that. And again, not mad at him. I got issues with Conor. This is not one of them. Then I just and made a movie, and that's gonna suck. And all that same crap we've been seeing. So apparently, he finally got enough of it out of his system that he's willing to get back in the USADA testing pool. They have not tested him yet. And it probably wouldn't matter anyway, even if he. Like, are we going to pretend that the UFC isn't going to just make way for Conor at this point? Now, the shift in timelines here would mean that instead of. Because the original thing was he and Michael Chandler are going to have the thing and the tough season, and then they're going to fight at the end of that, and then, okay, they never signed contracts. So when are they going to fight? Well, at the end of the season. Okay, how about now? 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 And to the point where, like, no, he won't even be fighting in December. At this moment in time, the only sort of timeline that makes sense now would be putting Conor at UFC 300. That's just kind of where we are. And I think they'll do it. I'm not even mad at anyone involved. I am so over the entire existence of Conor McGregor as it pertains to things I have to talk about. I don't care. Look, did he get on the gear for a movie role into rehab and injury? Yes. You have to be an idiot to think he didn't. Of course he did. No penalties were assigned. He never. Whatever. Don't care. I don't care. I genuinely don't care. Everyone in Hollywood's on something to look good for the camera between roids and then weight cutting and what. I just wish they were honest about it. But no, of course we can't be honest about it. I don't care. And recovering from that kind of a serious injury, my man, you do whatever you feel is best. I do not care. I do not care at all. So there's that. Now, apparently, again, we're looking at him and Michael Chandler in all probability at UFC 300. I still don't care. I look, Connor's got like this one in him, and then he's done. And we're really thinking he's going to be around on a regular basis at this point? No, he's not. And I don't even know how much I like his chances against Chandler. I mean, I like them better than against certain people, but I'm not going to be shocked if Chandler goes out there and beats him. Not one bit. But he is theoretically back in the pool. Watch him fail drug tests. Please. I want maximum carnage. Chaos, not carnage. I want maximal chaos. Conor getting back in the pool, instantly failing drug tests, would make me so happy in that respect. Um, yeah, all right. I think that's everything I have for news. So let's check the old social media account, see if anything crazy is happening over there. If not, we will do plugs and then get out of here. All right, nothing new there. Well, nothing I'm going to talk about here at any rate. There's stuff happening in the world, but I try to limit the scope of this podcast to MMA and things immediately related to it, which occasionally does move out into other areas, but we're going to leave it at that today, I think. All right, last week, myself and Mark Radulich got together and we reviewed Saw X, which was an interesting discussion because he hasn't seen much of the franchise and is not a big fan of the gore. As a guy who's somewhere between like a fourth and a fifth gorehound, not bloodhound, gorehound, didn't bother me, but we talked about that. This week, Monday, back on Mondays, which is our more regular time slot for Damn You Hollywood these days, we will be reviewing The Creator, which is the new Gareth Edwards movie, his first shot as a writer and director. He's directed some stuff I've enjoyed, so Mark and I are gonna see it. We'll talk about it. That'll be fun. My usual spate of professional wrestling and MMA coverage, MLW stuff on Thursday, WWE SmackDown on Friday, UFC event on Saturday, and we are back here next week to review UFC on ESPN Plus 88 and preview UFC 294. So we'll be back to preview that, and yeah, that's it for me. Thank you all very, very much for listening. I appreciate the heck out of you. Stay safe out there. Things are getting crazy. And please continue to be well, be safe, and behave.